This one starts with a Kafka quote, so you already know it's gonna be good. But the story itself is set in Uruguay back in the 70s, and the director is from Uruguay as well. So he probably grew up during or just after these events took place. And at the time the country was under a military dictatorship, which is usually not a good thing and generally causes a lot of friction and tension. And the story is about these 3 prisoners who are put into solitary confinement. I'm gonna be honest though, I'm a little bit hazy on the details as to why exactly they are in prison. I think it had something to do with them being part of an anti-regime movement. But anyway, they're in prison regardless and are kept in solitary confinement. They're not allowed to see anyone, talk to anyone, and even the guards are instructed not to speak with them. They're also moved from one facility to another every once in a while, just in case they're getting a little bit too used to their surroundings, a little bit too comfortable. And the mission of the government seems to be pretty simple. If they can't kill them, because of the political implications, they're gonna drive them mad instead. They're gonna do everything in their power to see that they lose their minds. Through physical and mental torture, and they do put them through a lot. I mean, the conditions they are kept in are pretty much the definition of inhumane. And yet, these 3 don't seem to be giving up or giving in. And they try their best to find ways to cope with their situation, even though they don't really have any tools at their disposal. There's not a whole lot you can do when stuck in an empty cell by yourself. Nevertheless, they do figure out some ways to keep themselves occupied. And even though this movie is pretty dark and grim, and not exactly uplifting in a lot of ways, there is also a comedic angle to it that pokes through every once in a while. And not only that, it is kinda inspiring too. It is essentially about the unbreakable human spirit. What a person can endure and make it through if they're determined enough. So in that sense, it is actually an uplifting and empowering story. Because this is based on true events and real people too. People who have played a significant role in the history of Uruguay. And despite of how brutal and depressing this thing can be at times, at the end of the day, it's not really a bummer of a movie. It's also a pretty well-made movie with some great performances. And even though it's a bit over 2 hours and deals with some pretty tough subject matter, it didn't feel too long or like it dragged or anything like that. And the story actually spans 12 years, as the title might suggest. So it jumps ahead quite a bit, but it didn't feel jarring or anything. It just felt like they probably skipped over the more monotonous bits. And you know what this movie actually reminded me of? The old Papillon. Which is definitely a compliment, because I absolutely love that movie. And this one shares a lot of similarities with that one, without feeling like a ripoff. And while this one does have some humor in it, it's a lot less than Papillon. But it didn't really feel like it needed more of it or anything either. Because that's also a tricky thing to pull off, injecting humor into a very serious movie like this. You can so easily overdo it or just make it feel tonally inconsistent. But this one didn't, it pulled it off very well, and yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I learned something too, that's the cool thing about movies like this. I mean, going into this I basically knew nothing about Uruguay. And I still know next to nothing, but at least I know a little bit of something. And yeah, overall I thought this was a good, informative and entertaining movie. And I don't really have any genuine complaints about it. However, would I recommend it? Yeah, unless you have a strong aversion to seeing people being mistreated, then you can probably skip this one. Or don't. After all, I'm not your dad. But hey, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen it? Did you like it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a thumbs up or sub to the channel, because that would be fantastic. And if you'd like, you can also support me on Patreon or PayPal through the links in the description. And as always, I appreciate you and thanks for watching.